cantor's daughters denote mitzvah. Maybe I was being a little too esoteric. I am sure, as for many of you, whenever I think of the story of the Exodus, I immediately think of Cecil B. DeMille's Ten Commandments. As a random aside, the 1956 version with Charlton Heston was actually the second one DeMille made. His original version was a 1923 silent picture, which contained both a version of the Exodus story and a modern study of two brothers' views of the Ten Commandments. Now, I remember watching the Heston version every spring when it would come on shortly before Passover. But my most favorite memory of it was in confirmation class, where my father not only taught us about the movie, but also pointed out certain anachronisms, like how some of the mob in the Exodus from Egypt were wearing things like sunglasses and wristwatches. And of course, there is a meta-metaphor of Heston playing both Moses and also the voice of God. So really, when God was talking to Moses, we can wonder, was Moses just talking to himself? However, as we are reading this week from Parashat Bo, we're at the point of the book of Shemot where we are learning about the final three plagues to fall upon Egypt: locusts, darkness, and death of the firstborn. Now, it doesn't exactly occur as depicted in the Ten Commandments. Nonetheless, for anyone who has seen this biblical epic, it was certainly eerie with the green mist flowing as the Israelites huddled in their homes praying to escape the Melech HaMavet, the angel of death. It was at this point that Moses, in the cinematic version, was demonstrating to those who had gathered together how to observe the first Passover. In the Torah, the first Passover involved taking a kid, a baby goat, on the 10th day, slaughtering it on the 14th, using its blood on the lintels of the doorposts, roasting it, sharing it with family and those in need, and eating it with matzah and maror, bitter herbs. One did this while dressed with their sandals on their feet and staff in hand to be prepared for the freedom that was about to come. The notion that they were to celebrate Passover as an acknowledgement from their freedom from slavery, even before they had been freed, is a sermon for another day. But we do know is that this 10th and final plague ultimately resulted in the Israelites not only leaving Egypt, but returning to and conquering the land of Canaan, the land that would ultimately become renamed Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, the land flowing with milk and honey, the land promised to our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Yisrael. Now, I will state that though this is going to be a sermon about Israel, it is not really a sermon about Israel. And though it also is about the horrors of October 7th and the subsequent war with Hamas and the multitudes of Israelis and Palestinians who are suffering, it is not really about that either. Instead, it is a story about something that happened to me on social media that was influenced by all these events, but not directly about them either. But I would like to preface that story by stating that don't worry, it ends well. So not to worry. Like many of you, I have a love-hate relationship with social media, especially Facebook. If there's one thing I like about it is it allows me to keep up with friends, both old and new. And I have one friend where we often exchange guitar pictures, especially of his finds on Reverb, a site for buying and selling guitars. Don't worry, I don't look at it on my own. He has found some beauties over time, and though our tastes may vary, there are some amazing instruments out there. And then, very recently, he sent me a meme entitled, "Who Did It Better, Cable Management System or God?" It is a picture of the human nervous system as compared to the cable system often created by IT guys. When looking at the picture, the IT cables are certainly more neat and organized than our very own nervous systems. So, of course, after seeing the meme, I responded tongue-in-cheek. All I know is God is less vengeful than those who work in IT. Meaning, for anyone who's ever worked with IT, if you mess up their system, they are not happy people. Then he replied, yet the IDF is more ruthless. As you can imagine, I was actually enraged by his response. And I may have typed in some words that I cannot say in polite company or from the bima, but let's just say they do match my initials. As I was ready to cut off this friend, to sever the relationship, but I couldn't put my finger as to why. From other posts I've seen of his, he is critical of the IDF, just as I have been critical of the Israeli government from time to time. He is certainly entitled to have his own thoughts and opinions on the matter, so why did this bother me so? And it took me a day before it really dawned on me. Because what happened is not that he wrote about the ruthlessness of the Iranian Guard or the US military. No, he decided that he had to write about it to both his Jewish friends and also a leader of the Jewish community. He made a choice to take our space of silliness and appreciations of all things music and force a dialogue, or at least an opinion, in a way that was jarring and upsetting and disarming. I was not ready nor expecting such an attack. And more than that, I was not expecting to either have to suddenly support the IDF or criticize them. It was not an invitation for dialogue. Instead, it was holding me accountable for the military of a foreign nation, a nation that I love, a nation that I have lived in, a nation that I have visited and have led trips to, a nation that my in-laws are from, and a nation that I hope to take my children to someday to visit. Nonetheless, according to the working definition of anti-Semitism, as has been adopted by our own State Department, it includes a statement that it is anti-Semitic to hold Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the State of Israel. And this is why it bothered me. I felt I was put in a position that I could not win, and that I was being held to a standard that was unfair. To be sure, to be Jewish is complicated. We are a people, but not a race. We are a religion, but we're also a family. We have a series of beliefs and practices, but those are often defined locally and observed in a multitude of ways. We have a central book, but also 2,000 years of interpretive tradition that often look at nothing like the original. We are collectively obligated to each other, Kol Yisrael Avirim Zeh Bazeh, but we are not collectively responsible for each other, even if we feel Jewish guilt over the failures or excesses of members of our community. We also have a homeland, but we are also a people defined by 2,500 years of diaspora. Therefore, there really is no good Western word or concept to sum up what it means to be Jewish. And this is in part why anti-Semitism works. It works because being Jewish is nebulous. It means others can accuse us of whatever fits their narrative. As Sarah Tuttle Singer wrote for the Times of Israel, Jews are always going to be reviled. For the anti-Semite, the Jew is whatever they hate. We are a chimera. And that makes their hate eternal. If they hate communism, we are communist scum. If they hate capitalism, we are capitalist scum. The postmodern universalists, anti-Semites, say that we are too particular and too tribal. The xenophobes call us globalists. For the white supremacists, we will never be white. For the radical woke, we are too white and uphold white supremacy. But they can all agree we are dirty Jews, no matter what color they imagine us. They also love us for a moment when we are the victim, but even that doesn't last long, and it isn't real love. It's a kind of pity that's really just one shade off from disgust anyway. And like always, like clockwork, they all find a reason to blame us for their own suffering. We're either too passive and weak, the eternal ghetto Jew crawling in the gutter, or we are the constant aggressor, the too powerful villain who brought it on ourselves. Every trouble in our world is all our fault. We are the scourge of the earth. Which is why it is all the more important to think of the words of Hillel, in Pirkei Avot. Im ein ani li mi li, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? As we have mentioned before, it is not up to us to endorse the state of Israel unless we choose. We're not obligated to teach the heartbreaking and complicated history of the Middle East to others, unless we so desire. And we certainly do not have to explain, justify, or defend our Jewish selves to others unless we feel it is warranted. It is not about winning an argument. It is about choosing how and when we want to engage and not to let others force us into it. With that in mind, I reached out to my friend. I explained why I was so hurt by what he did. I explained the uncomfortable position he put me in. I taught how this was actually borderline anti-Semitic, and then I waited. I built up his possible response in my mind. I waited for denial. I waited for the outrage. I waited for the personal attack. I waited, and then I received a message. With trepidation, I opened it, and it was an acknowledgement and an apology. And I wrote back accepting his apology and explained that I would be happy to discuss what was going on in the Middle East at any point, but that I preferred it to be through a series of questions and curiosity rather than veiled accusations. I don't know if we will dialogue about it or if we will simply get back to exploring silly memes and music. But in that moment, I was reminded how important it is, how powerful it is to own my Jewish self. Sadly, we are living in a world where so many are conflating Israel with the Jewish experience. There are times where it must feel like we are those Israelites huddled in our homes praying that the Melech HaMavet passes us by while we can hear the metaphoric screams outside our doors of those who are suffering. But Moses and the Israelites did not lose hope. They established a tradition that has been with us for nearly 3,000 years, the tradition of celebrating the Exodus even before it began. There will be better days ahead, but to get there, we need to keep holding on to the best parts of our heritage and tradition. We need to keep praying for the hostages who are now being held over 100 days, just as we keep praying for all the innocent Palestinians who are caught in the crossfire. They are not mutually exclusive to our own journeys and understandings. And we need to keep calling out anti-Semitism, even as we struggle with all that is transpiring in the world. But most importantly, we need to keep living proudly as Jews, for we will not give in to hate and fear, nor should we give in to the hate and fear in our own hearts. It is up to us to see the best in others and to give them and ourselves opportunities for teshuvah, for repair. For we may not be able to repair the world entire, but how beautiful it is if we can repair the relationship with a friend. Shabbat Shalom.